Well, hello and welcome to the second session, the second power session in the Strategy plus Systems equals Success series. For those of you who don't yet know me, I'm Judy Whalen. I am your host for this series. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time giving you all details of my background other than I have been working with both business owners and nonprofits for years in the Center for Strategic Change, helping them determine their strategy. You can find out more about me on my website, Center for Strategic Change, or in my LinkedIn profile. So in order to keep this really tight in the 30 minutes, I want to just give you a little overview of the topics that we're going to cover today and a little update based upon the fact that we already have one session in the can that's up on YouTube. So the topics that we're going to cover today include, we're going to examine the 3 levels of strategy, explore the characteristics of great strategists so that you can become a great strategist. We'll take a look at systems. What are the common systems that are being used in most businesses? And then I'm going to offer you some tips on creating effective systems. So let's just jump into this update. I'm going to see if I can get this PowerPoint going. Those of you who weren't able to join us for the first session, I just want to go back over the reason for offering this series. And while I'm doing that, why don't you start dropping where you're from in the chat and we'll start saying hello to each other. The reason that I'm offering this series is because it is already July. We're 6 months into the year. We have the rest of the 6 months to go. And if you identified goals at the beginning of the year, this is the time where things start to wane. First of all, it's summer for a lot of us, and we have a lot of other activities going on. So the purpose and the reason I decided to do this is because I want to help you stay focused on whatever those goals are that you set. And if you've gotten unclear about them or you didn't set any, now is the time, because you still have the next 6 months here to actually achieve those so that you can achieve your goals by the end of the year. And to just review the length of this series, it is initially 6 sessions, 6 power sessions, those 30-minute power sessions. If there's interest, we will continue to go on. And if there's not, we'll just stop at the 6. Now, throughout the series, I'm going to be using PowerPoint. And like I mentioned to the group last time, I know there's a lot of controversy about using PowerPoint, but PowerPoint is a tool to help us learn. And there's different learning styles. So some of us learn simply by auditory, but some of us don't. Some of us learn by seeing things on the screen. Some of us are kinesthetic, so that we need to be able to be tactile and participate. And there's going to be some opportunities to do that. And some of us learn best by reading and writing. So by seeing words on a screen, they can read, they can also be taking their own notes. So that's the reason for using PowerPoint or Keynote or whatever it is that you might use. I'd like you to mark the next session on your calendar. It's July 26th. And I'll tell you what the topics are when we get to the end of today's program. There will be a recording and it will be posted up on YouTube. In fact, the recording of the first session is up on YouTube. If you weren't able to attend, you can go to our YouTube channel, Center for Strategic Change, and you'll find it up there. And then at the end of today's session, I've got 2 special gifts for you that I'll have the links up on the screen so that you can take a screenshot and move on with those. All right, so now let's jump into this slide that came up that says growth. And as we're going through this, because the time frame is so tight, post your questions in the chat so that we can either get them answered at the end of today's session, or I can answer them between sessions and get the information out to all of you. So when I started this series and I started the planning, I decided that we needed to start from a common platform, a common place, or a common goal. And the common goal for most of us that are in business is that we want to grow our businesses, okay? And at some point, we're going to talk about the difference between growing and scaling, but we want to grow our businesses. So that's the premise for all of this. Everything that we're going to talk about throughout the series is based upon the fact that we want to grow. So last time, if you weren't with us last time, I did ask this question: do you have a strategy for growth? And even if you were with us last time, maybe you've rethought about this. And in the chat, just put a Y for yes, if you have a strategy for growth, or a question mark if you're unsure if you do, or if the strategy is unclear, or maybe you've just are thinking about starting a business and you haven't yet refined it. So just put a question mark, okay? And that just gives me an indication of the level of where you all are at as we move through this whole topic in this series. But today's question is, because we're going to be talking about levels of strategy, today's question is, how many levels of strategy do you think there are? So just, if you know, put your number in. If you don't know, just take a guess. What number would reflect the levels of strategy that you think there are? Okay, and just put that in the chat. And I'm going to keep on moving so that we can get through all the material in our tight time frame here. Okay, so this is what I encounter when I go out and I work with clients about strategy. And there is so much confusion about what strategy is. When you start talking about strategy for marketing or communications, then it even gets more mired in confusion. And this is the whole reason that I wanted to offer this series, is because the clearer you get about understanding strategy, the easier it's going to be for you to actually create the strategy for your business and implement it. Because that's the key, is implementing. So if you recall, last time we talked about the definition of strategy, and those of you who might have picked a number 3 for levels of strategy, you are absolutely correct. There's 3 levels of strategy, and this is going to be so interesting for those of you who might be, let's just say, in a corporate setting, and those of us who are entrepreneurs and in a different type of setting. So strategy is developed at 3 different levels: the corporate level, the business level, and the functional level. Now, for those of us that are not in a typical traditional corporation type setting, I just want to share with you how this impacts me and my business. So at the corporate level for me is really Whalen and Associates. That's my corporate level, my big umbrella that houses my other efforts. The business level for me is the Center for Strategic Change. Now, when we get to the functional level, this is where it gets really more, I'm going to say, more complex and diverse, because there's all different types of functions. So in my business, a functional level can be marketing, it can be finance, it can be product delivery, it can be customer service. There's all those different functional levels. So I want to take a few moments and just share with you how this might look at the different levels. Okay, so think about a corporate level, a big organization that has, let's just say, multiple products, multiple offices, probably multiple different businesses under its umbrella. So think corporate. So at the corporate level, the type of strategy that they develop is directional. And typically when I'm working with organizations, I'm typically working with them at this level, whether they're a corporate entity or they might be a nonprofit entity. They're typically looking at what I'm going to call that big picture, the direction of where do they want their business, their organization to go. And typically a directional strategy is focused around growth, stability, sustainability. You know, there could be other things, but it's typically around the big picture. How do they grow the business and how do they stay sustainable? So that's the big umbrella picture. But now if we go down to that business level, we're talking about a whole different type of strategy. We're talking about basically market share. So in my business level is the Center for Strategic Change. So I think about it from that aspect of what is the market share I have, want, desire for the Center for Strategic Change, and what is it that I have to do to achieve that. So if we look at the type of market share, okay, when we talk business level, we are talking more of a competitive strategy, okay? Not necessarily that big picture about growth, stability, sustainability. We are now talking about differentiation. What makes your business unique? What makes it, it's unique related to products or unique services that you offer. It often is related to cost, your pricing strategy, and your market share. So that's the business level, okay? So we've got corporate, we have business, okay? So let's move on to the next one, that functional level that I suspect we all fit into at some piece in this big strategy puzzle. Okay, the functional level gets down to all the different functions within an organization or business. So their level of strategy at a functional level really equates to the operational strategy. Okay, and it's much more focused on, and this is just a few examples. It's focused on marketing. It's focused on financial status, stability. It's focused on innovation, research and development, and there could be any number of other pieces that come out from an operational strategy. So those are basically the three levels of strategy. Corporate, which looks at that big directional level. Business, looking at market share. Functional, looking at all the, I'm going to say, think about it from the angle of departments, functions within the organization that need to fit into the operations. And they can all have a strategy of how they fit into that operational strategy. Okay. So I mentioned to you that we were going to talk about great strategists, characteristics. And the reason I wanted to include this is because we all have the potential to be great strategists. You have the potential to be a great strategist, or perhaps you already are. I have the potential to be a great strategist, and I keep working at becoming a great strategist. So I want to share these characteristics with you so that you can step back a bit and think about, how does that impact me? Are you able, in this case, to focus on the big picture? And I can tell you, this is really one of the challenges when I'm working with groups in terms of strategy. You know, we all have our own innate thinking styles that we're hardwired from birth with. And then we have learned behaviors that get added onto those. And one of the things I do encounter is it is difficult for some people to focus on the big picture because their brain doesn't function that way. They're not hardwired that way. They prefer to focus on the details. And they want to get things, tasks accomplished. So for someone whose innate thinking style is structured that way, it's very difficult for them to look at the big picture and long term. But then there's people like me who focus on the big picture. That's where my innate thinking style is look at the big picture. But it's also very hard for me to focus on the details. That is not my area of expertise. It's not my comfort zone. It's not what I prefer to do. So when you are thinking about being a strategist, if you're a big picture person, figure out how you're going to get the details handled. Keep that in mind. Okay, so here's another characteristic. Great strategists know how to maximize resources. And, we all know that resources are scarce. We like to think about them, that they would be abundant. And quite frankly, there is a mind shift here. If you can think about resources being abundant, they will become more abundant. There's a little, I'm going to share this with you. There's a little, let's call it a philosophy, that thoughts become things. And one of the things I have is this little stone, thanks to Mike Dooley of Tut, and you can look up Mike Dooley, is that thoughts do become things. And so when we think about things being scarce, we attract more things being scarce. When we think about that there is an abundance of resources available to us, we just have to figure out how to access them, they will become more available than they may be at the moment. But the whole key here is, as a strategist, you need to know how to maximize what you have or what you are able to develop, because that is the key. Being able to maximize the resources to the benefit of your organization. Okay, now another characteristic is great strategists are curious. And these people are looking at Post-it notes that they've put up on a glass window, and they're looking at, what relationships could be developing? Or how might one of these items impact another? Great strategists are curious about all kinds of things, not just the things that are in their business. Curious about things that are outside their business and how they might be able to maximize those. How might they be able to create relationships with something outside their business that can be a benefit to their business? So curious. Another characteristic, and this one is so huge, is great strategists are excellent communicators. Now, we all are quite aware that just because you can speak doesn't mean you're communicating. So this whole bullet could be a session in of itself, and maybe it will be if there's interest. Communication is not simple. As you all know, it means what is the message that's being sent? Is the person that it's being sent to actually receiving it? And when you start getting beyond individuals and working in teams and beyond, like think about your target audiences, this gets much more complicated. So being able to be an excellent communicator takes effort. First of all, it's a lot of listening. Excellent communicators are very good listeners. They're also able to let the other person, let's just say, have the floor, that they don't have to be in the limelight. They are able to draw out from the other person what they need to know. So do some research on what it takes to be an excellent communicator. Another characteristic is that great strategists are open-minded and optimistic. Okay, now optimistic kind of flows with visionary. Open-minded, that's a little harder one to, I'm going to just say, take on, because we all have our personal preferences. We've all gone through life and we've picked up all kinds of things that we've learned along the way. There's all kinds of media that's trying to influence us. So being open-minded takes conscious effort. It's not something that just happens. You have to be questioning. You have to be looking at all sides, looking at all the different facets, and being open to hearing all different opinions, objections, from all different types of sources. So open-mindedness takes work, but it is a characteristic of a great strategist. And great strategists are creative problem solvers. So it's not that they have a one solution fits everything. They're really able to think outside the box. They're able to diagram, as in this picture. They may flow chart, they may make lists. They are very creative in the way they go about looking at solutions. Let's not call them problems. They're creative in the way they go about developing solutions, which is different than totally just problem solving. Creative in the way they're looking at solutions. So those are some characteristics of great strategists. And let's just see if we can identify a few. If you can think of a great strategist, just put their name in the chat. Like I can think of one, obviously, who's been in the news just a lot in the last several months, is Elon Musk. Okay. Focuses on the big picture, knows how to maximize his resources, curious, creative problem solver. Another one, think about Jeff Bezos, Amazon. There's some that you could get into with, I don't want to get into politics, but if you get back into the whole military strategist, Napoleon keeps coming up when you start researching strategists. So if you've got some ideas of other strategists, just drop their name in the chat. All right, now we're going to go back onto this whole, because strategy is only one part of a way to achieve growth. You can have a strategy, but if you don't have any way to implement, you're just kind of stuck with a strategy. So that's the whole reason why I incorporated systems into this series, is systems provide you the means for doing the implementation. So if you recall from the last session, that systems are defined as a group of interacting, interdependent elements that meet a desired objective. Okay? Interacting, interdependent elements. So last time I asked, do you have effective systems that function consistently? And if you weren't with us, go ahead and answer that right now and just put a yes in the chat or a question mark if you're not sure if you have systems or if you're not sure how effective they are. But this time, I want to ask you, how many systems do you have in your business or nonprofit right now? Don't worry about whether they're effective. Just how many systems do you have? Okay, just do a quick count on your fingers or whatever. Just drop a number in the chat and let me know how many systems you might have at the moment. Okay, and while you're doing that, I'm going to move on to some common systems that we see in most businesses. And I have to tell you, I told you at the beginning of the series, this was not going to be theoretical at all. This is a practical way to grow your business, practical understanding of strategy, practical understanding of systems. So when it came time for me to list common systems, this is where the theory started hitting. And I just refused to go down the theory route. But this gets complex depending upon what complexity you want to build into your business. So some common systems, financial. Now think about financial systems as the overall umbrella. But under financial, you could have accounting, payroll, invoicing, payment processing, and probably several more, okay? So you've got all these other, what I'm going to call subsystems under a bigger topic of financial. And when you think about like marketing, okay? Now marketing is has a huge component to it. Market research, knowing your target audiences, being able to communicate about your products and services, your pricing, promotion, packing, the whole process for delivering. So there's all these other subsystems. And when you just look at information management, this is where it gets really, when I start thinking about the people aspect of the systems, because that's what this is about, is you've got hardware, you've got software, you've got telecommunications database, okay? And all of a sudden, if you think about this from a holistic perspective, you start to see that there's relationships between marketing, information management, sales, especially sales. Again, they've got market research, lead generation, order processing. There's just interdependencies amongst the subsystems. So if you were to just map this out on a big piece of paper, which is part of the process, you'd need to be using something like mind mapping, so you could show relationships. Because someone who's in accounting may also have a need to be interacting with an information management subsystem, a database. Certainly someone in sales might need to be interacting with a database. Think about a CRM. And when you start thinking about equipment, obviously there's relationships between that and every single one of these items. So you need to map it out, and you need to determine to what level of complexity and detail do you want the systems in your business to be documented. So these are just some common systems. If we were going to go the theoretical route, supposedly there are 12 systems that all flow, and you would have all the complexity. But these are just some examples of common systems. Now, depending upon the complexity of your organization, there's different systems within a corporate entity compared to systems within a solopreneur. Certainly a solopreneur would have financial, would have marketing, would have aspects of these, but not to the same level of complexity that a corporate level would. So here's some tips for building effective systems. Get really clear before you start on what's your desired outcome. And take one system at a time for when you start. Involve the staff who do the work, because they will have insights that you, if you're not doing the work, may not have. So involve the people who are actually doing the work to map out the steps. Okay, and you map out the steps. Now, this is an example of a flow chart, but you can map out the steps in any number of different ways. You could just do a list, put them in an Excel spreadsheet. You could create a Word document. You could just do, like I showed you on one of the other slides, there's another one coming up where you could do creative. People that are creative will just draw the way their systems work. So map out the steps. Here's an example, creative mapping. Decide on the level of detail that you want to document, because you can get really down into the weeds. Now, that might be really important for you, but you need to make that conscious decision about the level of detail. Look for those relationships between different systems. Decide how each step in that system that you're mapping is going to be handled. Who's going to do it? Is there a time frame? Is there let's just say an outcome or a document that's going to be produced? What's the outcome of that step? And then after you map it out, I suggest that you set it aside for a day, come back and review it with fresh eyes and revise it as needed, or pass it past someone else who hasn't worked on it at all. It's just like proofreading, pass it to somebody who hasn't worked on it, who may have questions that you can answer and improve the mapping of it. And once you have it refined, document the process. This is where a procedures handbook comes in. Put it into some kind of a documentation system so that whoever comes next knows how this process worked. If you're hiring people to be at different steps in the process, they know exactly what they're supposed to do. Document the process and date it. Make sure you put the date as to when this was finalized, approved. I don't know if you have to go through approval. If you do, approval date. And then schedule an annual review process. It's so easy that once you have a system in place to just kind of forget about it and it's working, but things change. Technology changes, people change. Schedule an annual review process for each one of the systems that you've created and determine if it needs refinement. Perhaps it's just fine the way it is, but update the date of approval or the date finalized. So that's it. We've covered all 4 topics, and we're just about wrapping up. The key takeaways I want to leave you with this week are the 3 levels of strategy can be in all one entity, like a solopreneur, or they can be in multiple entities under a big corporate umbrella. Okay, good strategists motivate people. Systems are a set of interdependent activities, interdependent relationships. And software is not a system, but a tool that is part of a system. And for joining me, I want to just say thank you so much for joining me. Stay focused on your goals so that you can achieve them by the end of the year. Think about those systems as you're implementing your activities. And one of the thank you gifts I want to give you is feel free to schedule a free 30-minute strategy call with me. If you have any questions about anything we've covered, questions about your business, just go to the link calendly.com/strategic change, and you'll be able to pick a time that works for your calendar. And then if you would like this free strategic planning ebook, just take a screenshot right now or take a shot with your camera and go to that link, and you'll be able to download the ebook that has a whole variety of articles on strategic planning, like reasons why smart companies use it, streetwise tips, and more. So our next session is now, let's see, Tuesday, July 26th. Again, it's going to be 12:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight. Join me on your lunch hour. Tentative topics: traps or pitfalls to avoid with strategy. Strategy versus tactics. What's the difference? Because now we're starting to talk systems, and that's where tactics are. Traps and pitfalls to avoid with systems. And then the systems role in operation. And again, these are all tentative. It could change based on questions or ideas that we get from you. Again, thank you. Here's the links to the 2 free gifts for you. Just take a screenshot, and I'm just so anxious to talk to you. If you've got a question, just schedule a time on my calendar. And if you have questions, put your questions in the chat, please. We will answer your questions by email. And if there's others who want to access the same answers, we can make sure that you get them also. And on that note, I want to say thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate your interest in this, and I wish you just great success in achieving your goals. Strategy plus systems equals success. So focus on strategy and systems. Wishing you all the best, and I hope to see you on July 26th.